I'm just very enthusiastic to take back from today's session something to the Catchment Management Coordination Group, some key messages from you. So if you were the all-powerful mighty, what lever would you pull to make the difference?
Maxine has talked about needing community voices to call for change, and it's not just about the science and technical advice. It needs to be felt, not just known. I'd like to bring in all the panelists around this idea of change. I know there's been quite a few themes, and certainly Paul, you've been very strong on some opportunities for change around the snowy water releases and the arrangements there.
It's all fantastic, this, totally fantastic. And, it's complicated, it's got the science. And as I said in my question, where do we pull the hearts of the community so that they start to actually take this in? We take in a lot of things. We've heard about climate change. These are big, issues. And now the students were leading the cause. How can we get our local students to start talking about this, our local folk to become part of the conversation? So please, from the panel members, give me a key message. You're the all-powerful. What lever do you want pulled?
If there's one thing you think we ought to change or something we ought to do differently, what would that be? Whether it's in light of the climate risks or the increasing pressures that we have in our resources, or the different expectations we have as a community now around what we value. And it's not just about water for consumptive use. There's a range of values that we're trying to represent here, whether it's environmental, whether it's water for recreational use, or even for cultural uses, which we haven't touched on too much today. So I might go around and invite each panelist to share one thought around that, and perhaps we'll aim to do it in the order that we spoke today. So Janice, would you like to share an area of change that you think that we ought to consider, and thinking in the light of a group like this, there's an opportunity for us to really make some of these sorts of connections and think about these sorts of issues from a broad system perspective. Janice.
Oh, Maxine. Big picture, a crystal ball. Going to be like. But I mean, when you first posed the question, my immediate thought was data monitoring. I mean, it's come up again, time and time again, and we just don't have enough. And I think also we need to be looking at, as Rebecca's been saying, different types of data, whether it's citizen science or other those kinds of information. But I think also, and again, picking up Rebecca's point, but linking it with Martin, is that storytelling, that speaking to young people. And Martin, I think your message is so powerful about showing the ability to recognise that what's been done previously was done with all the best intentions in the world, but we now recognise that it was flawed. And I think that's a very powerful message to tell to, and I think Maxine, your students, to school kids who are far more aware of climate change and the impacts than a lot of us are, because they're the ones who are going to be facing it. But I think that storytelling from people like Martin is the thing to take back.
Thanks, Janice. Owen.
I don't think I had enough time to prepare for such a big question, I'm afraid. I might just answer the smaller question, which is what would I want rather than what would I change if I was the Almighty. I'd be very nervous, actually, because I don't think I've got enough information to make the right decision. I think I'd make the same mistake as Martin's father did. But the thing I think we can do for the Upper Murrumbidgee at least is push hard on the snowy rules. I think Paul's concept, I raised this years ago when we'll discuss. I was discussing this with his predecessor, and we needed to change the rule that they don't have to ensure that there's 32 megalitres a day or 33, whatever it is, at mitigating. They have to provide it. The concept that you can take 99% of a river and turn it another way and then not destroy it with only 1% is obviously ludicrous. And then trying to pretend that you can get it back to its former glory with 10% is clearly just as ludicrous. And I don't think we even need to do that. That's not what we're saying we need to do. We need to provide a certain amount of water that can be used as efficiently as possible to create something that's healthy for that top 27 kilometres and beyond. And I think asking for the base flow to be provided instead of power is not an unreasonable start. And then when the environment water is compensating for the power, that can go on top of it. I struggle to see how that is an unreasonable position to have, and would be a way to protect the Upper Murrumbidgee far better than probably anything else we could do. I must admit, I'm a quantity guy, not a quality guy, but I can't see how that hurts it. And anyone who wants to jump on that anyone who's leading that bandwagon, like I'll jump on with it. So happy to support anything in that space. I think I'll leave the bigger question to others.
I'm pretty confident this topic will be something we'll cover later in the year. It's certainly an area of interest of mine as well. So watch this space in the snowy area. Now I'm going to continue moving. We're going to have to keep it pretty much to a minute each, unfortunately. So be very specific in terms of your thoughts. So I think Ralph, you're next one up.
Yeah, I'll just say two things. I'll actually give a tick to what Owen just said. I think this idea that the way that Tantanga is managed and the idea that so much water can be taken away, I mean, it just affects the health of the Murrumbidgee corridor, and how could we expect it to do otherwise? So I do think that is something we need to push in. Of course, it's a difficult one because it's a cross-border issue, and so I think that's one that this group is actually well placed to address. I just give a second tick just to advocacy. I don't know what it's like in everybody else's programs, but I don't think we'd be getting as much attention and funding if there wasn't strong advocacy at several levels, starting with the community, which is very important. But I think groups like this can have a role in convincing government to enable change, through funding and through just throwing their weight behind ideas. That's all to say.
That's great, Ralph. Thank you very much. Rebecca?
I'd just like to build on what Janice said. Something that I want particularly young people to know is that it's very easy to point the finger and say, and with horror at what previous generations have done and how they've changed the environment. But guess what? You're part of that story now. So what are you going to do with your chapter? Because you can change things too.
Brilliant. Cougar?
Yeah, I think I'll draw on Martin's presentation. I think the catchment health. We need to get more people around to do similar things like Martin has been doing. And that's something that it's not only just funds, it's the popularizing the messages and a little bit of help and knowledge transfer. So that will solve not most of the problems, but I think it's the core of the problem, to have a healthy catchment. Thanks.
Martin?
Thanks for that, Kruger. And Rebecca, I've been very excited today to be involved with all you guys. So thank you for having me on. Going right back to Maxine at the beginning, I think connecting and sharing is the secret for me, and that's connecting right back to the land, to the soil, reading the landscape. Guess what? Nature did have the solutions to all our problems. We're the problem. And so going back to Uncle Max, the Aboriginal elder of this area, who sadly passed away a few months ago, talk to the platypus. The platypus will tell us the solutions if we are prepared to sit down and listen. And so I think that's reading the landscape and working with nature is the solution.
Wonderful. Sharon?
Probably my big message would be, don't worry about being wrong. Worry about whether you're actually learning. At least from a scientific community point of view, the derogatory boffin, basically built their whole career on whether they were right about something or not. And we can already, and that's led to so much disconnect in the community. People more worried about whether they're right about something and whether they're learning something from each other. And it also leads into a bit of a replication crisis in science, particularly with, this theme of lack of funding that we have. Research groups are worried about how much money they can get to conduct their research. So they need to come up with new and innovative things all the time to have a better chance of getting that small amount of money that's available. And I mean, my whole research has actually been luxury in not having to worry about that. And look at all this cool stuff that I found. I mean, I'm not too sure if it's cool from a management perspective, but I find it extremely technically interesting that, the dryland salinized issues have not necessarily gone away. Maybe if we get enough wet years, it will all come back. So how are we going to deal with that? But we may not necessarily know unless, again, we just stop and think and looked and reflect and work out what is the landscape telling us, just exactly what Martin said then. So don't be afraid to be wrong, be afraid if you're not learning.
And Paul, we'll finish with you.
Yes, thanks, Michael. Yeah, good question. What will you change? I think any change to start with isn't going to come from me. I'm the one who answers what the fiddler play. I answer what the fiddler plays. I can make suggestions, but politically, it has to come from outside if there's going to be any major changes, and that's community pressure. If we're going to get some easy wins, and they're not easy because this stuff's in legal instruments, but it would be, even if we had the same water and we didn't get any more, it would just be using it more effectively. And I see that as, the easy ones. Flexibility. Number one, flexibility within the year, not being forced to say this is what the flow is going to be on every day in the year ahead, and then it's locked and left. To be actually able to say, look, this water is very valuable. Let's tweak it here, tweak it there, and use it much more effectively during the year. And the second flexibility thing is flexibility between years. Got a lot of water this year. It's probably still not enough, but compared to 10% of it in other years, would it be smart to be able to say, this is great, have this water now, but let's hold some aside because we know we're going to have maybe instead of 30-odd thousand, we're going to have 3,000 in a few years' time. And to be able to hold some back and use it in a later year would be much more useful. This stuff is incredibly valuable. If you tried to get the price that they're looking at for the 30,000, let's say it was like $100 per meg, 100 times 30,000, I don't know what that is, but it's, we're talking millions here that we've got, and we're just locking it and letting it run down, in a particular year. It's not the smartest use.
So Maxine, I hope this is this been the type of thing that you've been after?
This absolutely helps the voices of the collective through, for sure. And I would just encourage everyone, if you can speak out, please, because I think this is so complex. The real essence of what's going on gets lost.